necessary in preparation for your otherworldly existence is, above all, a thorough purification, preferably carried out every day. At the very last minute, shortly before death, you will no longer be able to wash off all the dirt accumulated in the course of a long life. We repeat, you go over as you are. You will take all the bad qualities with you to the other world. If the spirit does not free itself in time from earthly attractions and lust, the subtle body cannot separate in a pure condition from the physical. In such cases it bears a distinct deposit of earthly passions. If you have lived filthily down here, you will end up above there, among your kind, among the unclean. Many who believe themselves saints on earth will be highly surprised on what a low level they will find themselves in the subtle world. Anyone who believes that he will become pure as an angel just by dying is terribly mistaken. Our lower desires literally continue to cling to us and make the ascent to higher levels impossible. Nothing unclean can penetrate into a high, pure sphere. You will not dare to go to the altar in a dirty wedding dress. Even less can you appear in heaven with a dirty soul. Departing from the earthly sphere, the spirit must be cleansed of lower emanations. Any superfluous husk which the spirit brings along into the subtle world causes inexpressible pains. In a well-developed consciousness, a purification takes place, which frees the spirit from the husk. But the spirit which zealously retains its earthly habits experiences in the subtle world all the weaknesses which it was accustomed to undergo on the earthly plane. Going uphill, any superfluous load causes shortness of breath in the subtle world. The desire for material things torments us up there because in this spiritual world we are unable to satisfy it. In vain asks the drunkard for alcohol, the gourmet for food, and the lecher for horse. That really is hell. It is very distressing to carry things which were not previously outlived and which in the subtle world become a burden. Most painful of all is the perception of one's own coarseness. Even in the lower supermundane strata is felt the weight of one's own crudities. Often there are heard wails from the supermundane strata which are the appeals of the spirits not yet cleansed of this burden. It is reprehensible to litter the subtle world with the same light-mindedness as the earthly one, and coarse accumulations form, as it were, unerasable layers which are always visible. Everything in the supermundane world is created by our thoughts. It is therefore of the utmost importance that you practice this particular creative power already on earth. That means you must learn to think briefly, concisely, clearly, purposefully, and beautifully. The earthly existence cannot be final, and in such a transitory state, one may only prepare that which is most needed for the future flight. In other words, sharpen thought. Wings grow only through thought. If we lose clarity of thought in earthly battles, how can we maintain it during transition into the subtle world? How many people are there who are unable to produce just one clear thought and to distinguish the essential from the non-essential, the important from the unimportant, and the desirable from the necessary? They do not know what they want, so they do not have a goal and thus cannot walk a path. They are unable to relate adequately even the simplest incident. They fill their narrative with such heaps of uninteresting and irrelevant details, so that they lose sight of the red thread and get more and more lost, so that finally one gives up following them. Urusvati values clarity of thought. Imagine a dweller who is used to thinking in tangled and lengthy ways. He will experience great difficulty in communicating with those around him. It is pitiful to look at such inarticulate ones, for they become tangled in a labyrinth of dark, weak thoughts. Such people are incapable of building anything meaningful in the upper world. They will only produce chaos with their confused thoughts. It is regrettable that people enter the subtle world so unprepared for it. They bring their base habits along, and they squander the forces of thought on imperfect forms. In the subtle world, the creativeness of thought is developed in all domains. It is difficult even to imagine on what delusions this precious power is expended. People should be advised to get used to thinking even a little about the beautiful in order to avoid manifestations of ugliness. Some are not even able to procure adequate clothing over there. In the world of thought, we usually wear the garment of a former life. Those who have not preserved a clear memory of the past frequently have difficulties in the subtle world. They remember only random parts of their garments of various epochs, and thus create an ugly mixture. They feel a need to create a garment for themselves immediately, but their undisciplined imagination can visualize only scraps of their attire. Therefore, during your life on earth, you have to practice to think great, beautifully, and clearly. Then only will you be able to create something great and beautiful in heaven. A person who has accumulated a clear, benevolent consciousness on the earthly plane will also be a good builder in the subtle world. He will contribute not monstrosities, but the beautiful proportions and rhythm that answer to the majesty of the infinite. If we imagine the greatest spiritual toiler on earth, he will represent a tremendous power in the subtle world. Indispensable for this is imagination. You cannot build something that you cannot imagine. Therefore, only those who have acquired a broad imagination on the material plane will be great creators in the spiritual world. It is difficult to remember about imagination when we are already in the subtle world. There, we must apply it, not generate it. Already on earth, you have to get used to thought creation, which you may continue in the spiritual realm. Otherwise, you will remain unemployed there. Urusvati was astonished at the crowds in the subtle world that roamed idly with no work to do. They are small townsfolk crowded together as in the square of any modern town. There is a certain kind of person for whom there is nothing to do on earth, and therefore nothing worthwhile living for. However, if he carries such thoughts with him into the subtle world, he will continue the same idle existence there. In the subtle world, there is no language. The communication takes place directly with the help of our thoughts. Thus, you will be able to talk to other souls there only when you have learned to think briefly, concisely, clearly, and focused on the essential. Otherwise, you can neither send out a clear, understandable thought, nor grasp a thought sent to you. Picture a man who has entered the supermundane world and knows only how to communicate by speech. He will find himself in a deplorable situation. He will not easily learn thought transmission. At first, he will, like a mute, repeat words silently to himself. But if those words are not accompanied by clear thoughts, communication will not be possible. We have to practice already on earth this understanding directly from heart to heart. Even in the physical world, hearts resonating in harmony transmit a great deal to each other through the language of the heart. Let this language be a constant reminder about the potential of the subtle world. Why should one wait until one is in the subtle world to learn the art of thinking, when one can prepare oneself for this advancement while in the earthly life? Everyone, under any conditions, can perform his own experiments in mental discourse, and perhaps an answer will come to him. As we have seen in the broadcasting on meditation, you may already during your material incarnation get in contact with another being, for example, your teacher, by spiritual means, and lead with him a conversation without words. A hermit was once asked how he could dwell in continuous silence. He was much surprised and said, "On the contrary, I am never silent, but converse constantly. So many companions visit me." The hermit had drawn so near to the invisible world that it had become entirely perceptible to him. Prayer became communion, and that world revealed itself in all its magnitude. To such a spirit, his own transition into the subtle world is altogether imperceptible. Only gradually will the traveler understand how to express thoughts without words, and thus learn to receive thought transmissions from his new neighbors. The teacher will also turn to him mentally.